Good evening. Welcome to the Monday, February 8th, 2021 Education Committee and Supplementary Regular Board Meeting of the Lower Merion Board of School Directors. This meeting is being made public via Zoom and video recorded with sound for purpose of public broadcast. It's also being live streamed via our website, and all participants are muted upon entry. We will have opportunity for public comment after the presentations tonight. The chat feature will be turned on at that time, and comments and questions will be read by the district solicitor, and we'll have more instructions on that when the time comes. So welcome everyone, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Copeland for tonight's presentations.
Good evening, everyone. We've had some administrative absences tonight, so we're going to have to curtail some of our presentations. As the board knows, and some members of the public, we have a curriculum committee of the board. That committee met last week where we had 3 presentations. We're going to do one of those presentations this evening, along with President of the board, Mrs. Klein, asked me last week if we would give an update on our preparations for reopening, and so we'll do those 2 presentations this evening. The first presentation is from Jason Lilly. Mr. Lilly is the secondary supervisor of math and science, STEM, if you will, and he is going to update the board and public on our integrative math program. So without further ado, Mr. Lilly.
Thank you, Mr. Copeland. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So I want to take this opportunity tonight to give everyone an update on how our implementation of integrated math is going. As most people are aware, we just made a transition to integrated math last year officially. And during our first year of implementation, we didn't quite finish a year when we had COVID hit, and we had to shift into different forms of learning. That also affected training staff for the second year of implementation, which as everyone knows right now, we are again continuing with different learning platforms for different students across the district. So it's been challenging as far as some things that were unexpected during that implementation, but I'm here to share how it's going overall as we are now halfway into our second year of implementation. So just to give some background on how we got here, the work for integrated math is certainly grounded in our strategic plan. What I want to highlight in this particular slide is what we used to do, and the majority approach of our instruction of mathematics was the I do, we do, you do approach, where the teacher would model something, and then as a class with the teacher together, they would practice that skill. And then the teacher would say, okay, now you try and do that yourself. And in other words, give back to me exactly what I just showed you. We've made a shift, conscious effort, to change our approach to the you do and then we do, meaning we've added inquiry and exploratory components to our mathematics program. And then we take time to digest that and talk about that as a class where students also verbalize their thinking and their thought process. This is the original timeline that was shared when we made the move to integrated math. Currently, we are in 2021 with the implementation of Integrated 2, which has replaced our previous geometry course. Everything that you see above the red line, above that red geometry replacement, has already taken place. So we've changed some of our middle school programming. This was bigger than integrated math. We added a Math 8 course. We added an accelerated Math 7-8 course. So there've been a whole bunch of changes that started last year. And right now We are with integrated 2 with 1 more year to go until we reach that full implementation of integrated 1, 2, and 3, replacing our traditional algebra, geometry, algebra 2 sequence. Some of the things that we looked at when we made this decision was an audit that was conducted at the middle school specifically. And what we found in that audit was that our curriculum needed some work. Some of our sequencing was not aligned with state standards. We had double content being taught to our 8th grade students, regardless of what 8th grade course they had. We didn't have a Math 8 course, so the Math 8 standards were either embedded in Algebra 1 Part A, or geometry. We had an access and equity gap that was identified as far as which sequence students were following. We had major issues with assessment. The majority of our students at the middle school were taking Keystones and PSSAs, especially in that 8th grade year. And we knew we had to do something to get stronger engagement in mathematics. One of the things that we spent a lot of time looking at was that achievement gap. And we specifically were looking for something different that would make an impact. And when we looked at integrated math was a content change and reorganizing and restructuring the content. But when we looked at what were the different resources available out there, the one we settled on was something from the Mathematics Vision Project. I also, when we worked through that adoption, I asked the authors of that program to show me a school district that looked like Lower Merion that was having success. And they said, sure. So they shared Chapel Hill, Carborough City School District. This is the #1 school district in North Carolina. People are familiar with this particular area because this is where you have UNC, you have Duke, and you have NC State. So they call it the Research Triangle. It's very similar to Lower Merion, both demographically and as far as academic performance. So this is the #1 district in North Carolina. Every single subgroup that they evaluated over the implementation there met with additional success, increased success academically. So this was really important to us. And the one thing I do have on here that was of note is they had a Math 8 course that fed into this integrated sequence. So again, that was part of the changes we made here at Lower Merion to hopefully meet with the same success. This is just a visual of our new math sequence. This is available on the district website. One of the other things that we added to our sequencing were multiple points within the sequence for acceleration. We know that students mature mathematically at different times throughout those years. And so to honor that, we created acceleration points after Math 4, Math 5, Math 6, and Math 7. Those first 3 years, there are some components to them for students to meet qualifications to accelerate, but in that, after the Math 7 course, that Math 8 summer option is available to anyone who's interested in participating. Once students complete that Math 8 course in some way, which there's lots of different ways to do that, students transition into that integrated math sequence. And the integrated math sequence looks like this. We have honors and college prep versions of those courses. Integrated 1 is the foundational course, so there are no levels to integrated 1. It's the foundational course, similar to how Algebra 1 existed in the old sequence. But students have the flexibility to move up and down within the integrated sequence. One of the things that made this particular sequencing of topics stand out is that anything that's in the honors course in this particular program, from the Mathematics Vision Project, is additional and not a prerequisite to the next honors level course. So that creates greater access and flexibility for our students to move up and down within that integrated pathway. We know, and this is a quote from Deborah Ball, who was the former AERA president, we know that what students learn is fundamentally connected with how they learn it. As I kind of stated earlier, one of our big shifts was to make this more of a student-driven and student-centered approach to mathematics. It's more hands-on, It's more engaging. Students are getting to share their work with their peers. They're able to talk about their thinking, and that's something we really wanted to hone in on. Throughout the initial pilot, these were some of the things that stood out. We definitely saw improved student engagement. We saw increases in how students were actually using the language to talk about mathematics in the classes. We had some students who talked about mathematics for the first time throughout that pilot. They hadn't spoken about math all year, and all of a sudden they were ready and chomping at the bit to share their thinking with their peers. One of the foundations of this particular resource is multiple representations. In mathematics, we're talking about algebraically, graphically, through tables, charts, words, different ways of talking about the same particular idea. This resource has a spiral with a purpose. And what I mean by that is we think about, we hear a lot about pre-teaching and reteaching. This particular program has a component, a daily component that spirals in previous information, but it does it in a meaningful way. What it'll do is it previews information that students will need to access that lesson, but it also then has a spiral component of previewing information that would be relevant for the next particular unit. So there's two different spirals that are going on at all times. So a chance to catch up and rethink about some skills you maybe haven't thought about in a while, but also to access your brain to get ready for the current information. As I said, it's more student driven and student centered. And one of the big things that stood out when we initially talked about this was its application to the real world. Rather than just doing math, you're actually showing how it's used in the real world. Just to kind of share some different pieces of this. I know the data presentation was also something that we shared at the last CCOB meeting. Here, what I'm sharing is following a cohort of students. This was in the initial year of Integrated Math 1, was 1920 last year. This is 9th grade students who were at Harriton High School. And you can see that performance in their first year. What I will share is that performance is significantly better than what we had experienced with our Algebra 1 course in that same year. What I want to highlight in this slide is this year, 2021. Even with what we experienced last year and what we've experienced this year so far through the pandemic, we can see that academically our scores have risen. Now, these are not the same students. This is two different cohorts of kids, so we acknowledge that. But I will say, I think there are two factors involved here. One is it's the second year that the teachers are able to work through this particular course. Last year was their first year, so I feel like the teachers are stronger at delivering this. One of the things that I haven't said tonight, but I have said previously, is the resource we're using from the Mathematics Vision Project is open source. What that means is it's a free resource for us to use. It also allows us to modify and adapt that program to meet our needs and our student needs. So we're doing that. So after we work through that first year, we've made some adjustments and changes, and you can see the results here. The other thing I want to highlight, which could be a potential big difference here, is last year in that first year of implementation, the students in that course did not have Math 8 because that course did not exist in our previous sequence. So what you're seeing in 2021 are students who did have some version of Math 8 prior to entering into that course. So there are some curricular differences in the student background. In this slide, it's a little different. This is following the same cohort of students. So the students who were in that Integrated 1 for the first time last year, this is how they're doing in Integrated 2 this year. Now remember, Integrated 2, this is the first year of implementation of that course. So it's new for the teachers, it's new for the students. But as you can see, the students who were in that first year course last year are performing very well in the second year course of Integrated Math, even with everything that's going on. One other thing that I will point out here, as I showed in a previous slide, students have the opportunity to move from Integrated 1 into either college prep or an honors version of Integrated 2 and 3. So we do have some movement from that particular cohort into honors and CP the following year. As we're working through this implementation in these challenging times, we solicited feedback from our teachers who are working through this. So first we have some challenges, and some of these are relevant beyond integrated math. But particular to this particular resource, one of the things that's come out is teachers having to sometimes find additional practice problems for students. And we kind of knew that going in, but again, with this being open source, we have the ability to adapt and modify resources to make them better for our kids. With this being a student-centered, more inquiry-based approach with a spiral to it, it takes some getting used to. Teachers who have for a long time done the I do, we do, you do approach, it's definitely a mindset shift to let go of being the sage on the stage. So it's a challenge. So they're acknowledging that, and we knew that would be part of it. The resource itself was designed for 60-minute blocks of time. We don't use 60-minute blocks of time at Lower Merion. So again, there has been some modifications on our part to make it work. So some lessons we do over 2 days. Some of them we're adjusting to make them be 1 day. So we've done those things. We have found that some of the real world connections, which some of it is surprising, some of them are unfamiliar to some of our students. One that came up recently was about quilts, and we found that some of our students didn't really know what a quilt was. So we do the best we can when we have these real world scenarios to set the stage and make sure that all of our kids are ready to engage with the work and they understand the language and the vocabulary. And obviously with virtual learning, we do have some of those distractors. It's, you know, these kids are on devices all the time. So it is challenging to maintain engagement virtually, but we're doing the best we can. And I'm going to show you some things tonight that we've done to try to mitigate that and make sure our students are engaged with the mathematics part. With the challenges also come strengths. There are definitely some things that are strengths to this program. You saw it through the pilot feedback, and we're seeing those things carry through now that we're in the second year of implementation. The biggest thing is that it allows students to share their own individual thinking. It allows them to discuss their thinking with peers. It validates what they are doing. There's no one right way to do these kind of math problems. So there's different levels of access. So kids can jump right in and do what they feel is the best way to get a problem started, but then they have opportunities to talk to their peers and their teacher to move that work forward. The Ready, Set, Go is something many teachers highlighted that they enjoyed about this program, that they liked about it. That is the built-in spiral. So there's 3 things there. One is kind of pre-teaching the information to access the current lesson. One of them is about the current lesson. So think of traditional math practice. And then one of them is accessing that information for the upcoming unit. So you have a built-in spiral on the front and back side with current information built in the middle. There are extension activities for those students who are ready for that. As I said, as you move into integrated 2 and 3, there are honors versions, and that's really what it is. And those things don't prevent other students from moving forward in the program. It doesn't give someone a leg up on somebody else or keep someone else from moving forward in the next particular topic. So those are built in as opportunities to do so. And that discovery learning, that student-centered part of this, that is something, again, multiple people highlighted as being a strength of this particular program and resource, our change to integrated math. Desmos is something I'm going to talk about a little bit and give you a real quick overview and just show you a couple things that Desmos has done. Desmos is the interactive math platform that we have kind of adopted as a way to do the things that we saw happening when kids were all face-to-face before we went virtual last year. So that was one of the things the math department as a whole really worked towards, was finding ways to maintain the integrity of this particular program, keep those changes that we made, keep this being a student-centered, student-driven approach to mathematics, regardless of the learning platform that students were choosing. So in its simplest form, Desmos allows multiple students to answer questions and the teacher can see everything that's going on their screens. That's kind of what it does. Students submit answers, they submit their work. The teacher can share feedback to them both during and after. The teacher can take snapshots of student work and share it to the whole class. And then they discuss. The teacher can ask a student, hey, would you be willing to let me put yours up? And can you talk about that? There's lots of things that it can do. Desmos as a platform was more known because originally it was a free graphing calculator online that all students could use. So originally Desmos was set up to kind of close that access gap for expensive graphing calculators that not all students could afford. So that's where it started. And now what it has morphed into is a way for educators, and it's still free, a way for educators to continue doing things like graphing calculator, but also it has tools built in for kids to do graphs, tables, charts, write your answer, share your work, and take screenshots and captures and provide feedback for teachers and students. So I do want to quick show that to you. So I'm going to stop this share really quick, and I'm going to switch to Desmos. So this is what Desmos looks like. And as I give you a quick overview of Desmos, what I do want to say is this. What I'm going to show you right now, this is one of the lessons in integrated math. Integrated math, because of the pandemic across the country and around the world, people have started developing ways to do this in more online type of ways. So there are different user groups for integrated math. Lower Merion definitely has been a participant in those. There's one on Facebook, and there are Desmos user groups as well. But what's happening is teachers across the country and the world are developing lessons and putting them into a virtual format and then sharing them to each other. And then someone else takes it, makes it better, shares it back. And we end up with things like this. So what I'm going to show you, these are just some things. So a student would see this. Instead of having a paper handout, that handout is now virtual and looks like this. This is a question that just says, describe what's happening. And one of the things that this particular program continually gets at is multiple representation. So in this instance, kids are oftentimes trying to show their thinking. So someone might do something like this. I'm just going to give you a quick, so you can draw on this. So I'm going to draw and do a little quick. So what do you see? It's about a pattern. So some student might do that and submit that they see this as a pattern. And what they see is every time they see a square, +1. So this might look like a square +1. Someone might go a little further and they might throw, okay, here's a 1. Here I see 4 things in here +1. Here I see 9 things +1. And what this is ultimately questioning them is what type of equation or function would this be? And in this instance, we have squares, which kind of helps give it away. You also see these numbers. So the conversation might be, I know this is 1 squared, 2 squared, 3 squared. This is a quadratic function. Okay, this is x squared. But someone else might do this completely different. Someone else might see a different pattern. They might circle different things. They might mark it differently. But this is something where the teacher could take a screenshot of this and then put it up in front of the class and say, okay, can you talk to me about what you saw here and what those things mean to you? This was the quilt lesson that I was talking about. This is what it looks like. So this was about you are running a quilt company, and Optima Prime from Optimus Quilts is doing this. And so this was a place where they took some time then, once they realized not everybody knew what a quilt was, to talk about this. Quilts are made up of squares. Sometimes it's hard to see, so they could, kind of highlight some of these things here and show that these are all individual squares. And then it went back to area of the face, which was made up of squares. Let me take you to a different slide. Here's an example of the graphing resources that are in here. So again, this was the same thing. I know I showed you one where it looked like it was something squared +1. This shows you what the graph would look like. So you can kind of see as a student works through this particular lesson, they see lots of different ways to talk about squares and things that are squared. And what does that mean? If a student moves this slider, it changes the graph. So you can see ultimately this lesson is supposed to be about what happens when you change something in a parent function. How does that shift the graph, left, right, up, and down? You can also go in here and change the range. You can also go in here and just type in a number rather than playing with the slider. So here's an open-ended question. It's not all just pick an answer or click and show me your graph or your table or your chart. Students can write in here. So this is a question about explain why your conclusion would be true for any of these functions in this particular way. You're going to get a lot of different answers as a teacher. This is where it's important that they can see all the different screens. So if someone's sitting with a blank screen, a teacher could jump in and put a comment and say, hey, did you think about maybe starting it or trying this, so they can get them started. Someone else, you could put a comment that says, I like the direction you're going here. Did you think about maybe this? And now you're furthering their thinking. But the teachers are able to provide feedback. They can also take a snapshot of any one of those at any time, and then they can put it up in the class. One of the things that was highlighted in CCOB was that you don't have to have the student names be part of this. The system has a default that you can switch off, and instead it gives all the students a famous mathematician name instead of their regular name. So you could share something out and you could say, today Pythagoras came up with this idea. Let's talk about that. So you don't have to put kids on the spot. You don't have to make students uncomfortable sharing their work or their thinking. It can be completely blind and random like that. Here's another instance of the graphs. One of the things that students can do, you could just start clicking these. You can see the points. You can turn them off. So if someone liked making a table of values, they could click on the points to see where they were. And then it's asking you to come up with equations for these two things. I'm just trying to give you a kind of a quick snippet of some of the different things that this can do. This is the last one that I'm going to show you from Desmos. But again, what's different here is it's now saying, okay, what happens if you start putting numbers inside instead of adding it on to the end? So it has now transitioned from a square plus something to something being added inside the squares. And they're relating that to the length of the squares rather than just adding on to the area of the squares. You can type things in here. And it will start graphing those points. If you were to do it accurately, which obviously I'm not, it would start building where these go. And you would be able to see it. Also automatically use two different colors. So you could see the two different lines graphed on the same particular graph to try to then determine what happened from the original and then the +5. So it's pretty neat. It's pretty interactive. It does a lot of different things. And then in this particular one, this is one of my favorite things that are part of this particular resource that we use. What do you notice? What are you wondering about? It's built in. So once somebody does this, they can actually write what they saw or what they think they saw. And again, this is one of those things that drives classroom discussions. This is what I saw, and here's what I was thinking, and this is where I noticed that. And someone else could say something different and build off of that. So they have individual time, and then they have time to share out. Those are the things that we were trying to keep alive, regardless of the learning platform. It's much easier in a classroom for a teacher to walk around and see everyone's work as they're doing things. That was what we had last year at the beginning of the year. What we've done though now is found a way to still do those things in a virtual setting. So we've been able to do that. It took a little bit to figure it out, but we have figured it out. This is a resource that now that we have this, we are going to continue to use this regardless of the learning platform. So when students come back, there will be times where we will do this in a digital way, not all the time, but this is a great resource. And it's an example of some of the things that have come out of the pandemic that are going to keep going. It's not just a now thing. This will be an forever thing. And these lessons are built. So this is also a way for students to access things going forward if they're outside the classroom. I'm just going to go back quick and wrap up the presentation. So that was Desmos. It's pretty neat. It does lots of things. This is an example. I know it might be a little tough to see, but this is an example of what you could do from Desmos. You could take two students' work, snapshots of their work, put them side by side. These are both accurate ways to do the same problem. They look completely different, and the explanation of the steps are completely different, but what you see here is the final answer in both of these is the same. So start to finish, they ended up in the same place, but the way they got there was very different. this is what I mean by this honors different ways of thinking and accessing a program. One of the questions we get a lot is, yeah, but doesn't efficiency matter? The answer to that is sometimes, but having students thinking be honored and seeing different ways to get to the same place is equally as important. So that's where we are now, and this is where we're going. We have one course left to phase in to complete our integrated math sequence and our changes to our middle school programming all the way through integrated math 3. So as of next year, we will have transitioned out Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2, and we'll have in its place created an integrated math pathway for all of our students. Thank you, everyone, for hearing that update on integrated math. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Thanks, Jason. Members of the board?
Thank you, Mr. Lilly. Do we have any questions from the board? Dr. Gilbert?
I don't have a question. I just want to say, because I wasn't at CCOB, Mr. Lilly, that this is just incredibly impressive, because I know this has been a big part of our strategic planning process. This was one of the big curricular changes that have been in planning for a while. And I think actually continuing to do this during the pandemic is really something else. And I just want to say how much I appreciate our teachers, but also all the support they're getting. So it's really great to see this sort of it come to fruition. So appreciate it.
Thank you. I really appreciate hearing that.
Thank you. Ms. Finger?
Also, really it's just a comment. Every time I hear the presentation when you first introduced it, you know, a couple years ago, this year, I mean, your passion and enthusiasm and excitement just comes through, and it just, you know, as an educator, as a parent whose child went through math, I mean, it's just really exciting for all the right reasons. You know, the access, the equity, the opportunity, the allowing for student inquiry, sharing and making thinking visible, and coming at problems or, you know, puzzles from different perspectives, and allowing, you know, different ways of solving a problem. And then, of course, providing feedback. And then, you know, the Desmos, it's really just fabulous. I just think it's just such a great addition. So thank you for bringing it, and for the teachers for really embracing all of it. Excellent. Really well done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Finger. Ms. Kalish?
Thank you. I just wanted to reiterate that I really appreciate the sort of broad reaching approach that with equity that this new program has taken, both in terms of all the various on-ramps into the different levels of math that we now have going, and also with the use of Desmos. I know I mentioned this in CCOB, but even when I was in high school, graphing calculator was $150. And so I know for a lot of our students that would be a hardship. And so to have a fantastic teaching tool and to not have to make this intense expenditure, in addition to the other things that we ask kids and their families to pay for, I really appreciate that the math department has prioritized that in that way. Oh, and that you used a free open source program so that we didn't have to pay for a program that we would then have to put that burden on our taxpayers. So I appreciate that as well.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Moore?
Yeah, no, again, just echoing everybody else, really great. I really appreciate one of the things, just again, given where we are with COVID, to have Desmos as a tool that we're not losing anything by being virtual, and that students are able to engage with it even throughout the virtual scenario, I think is just really excellent. And I know we talked about this briefly at CCOB, but just want to raise it again for the public's benefit, and that is around the cultural relevance with the knitting, and just ensuring that we're making sure that we're looking into that, and that, the references are culturally sensitive, then everybody gets it. And then just if you could touch on how we're looking at measuring the achievement gap closure that has been experienced in other places, how we're going to, kind of track for that within a district, if you could just speak to those two things.
Sure. So for the first part, we definitely made a concerted effort to recognize places where the content or the relevancy that was built in is relevant for our students. When we found out that some of the students weren't familiar with quilts, one of our teachers actually went and he had shared this, a link of the student work. He actually took the time to have the kids investigate and work on the quilts of the Underground Railroad, which was unbelievably interesting, to say the least. The students ended up creating quilt squares and gave them meaning. It was amazing. I mean, I actually learned a lot through what they shared. And so we tried to find ways to make it relevant, but also, put that in context with some real world historical purposes where those were actually used. So that was really neat to see. He made a museum gallery, the student work, which was really cool. Again, it was virtual, but it was really neat. And the students had a chance to validate their own thinking and why they made their quilt the way they did and what it represented if they were there in that time. So it was really neat. As far as measuring growth, it's been a little bit challenging. The information, the data that I shared from Chapel Hill, that was on their state assessments over those 3 years, which we have not even had. So we have not had a state assessment since the implementation of this program. The plan was to compare that to previous data. That still is the plan, but at this time we don't have really something to compare the old sequence to versus the new one, because we just don't have comparative data at this time. And with last year being the first year of implementation, we've kind of done the best we can to compare last year to this year. But until we have some of the bigger data, we won't be able to do that. But the plan is to definitely do so.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the board? So I'll follow up quickly on that in terms of, just for people that might not be as well versed, the integrated 3, which is sort of taking over the algebra 2. So it's not just a middle school program, I guess is the part that I wanted to clarify. It really goes into the beginning of high school for most students. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's absolutely correct. We made changes to our 6, 7, and 8. And then we do have a number of students who take the integrated math courses at the middle level, but that replaces our entire sequence. We revamped our sequence from 6th grade all the way up through algebra 2. And that was really the change. So it was bigger than just those 3 courses, but the reality is, yes, this impacted students in grade 6 all the way up through algebra 2.
Thank you. And so then following up on the piece around the data and sort of tracking that, I know that we haven't had testing, but the math testing, generally the PSSAs go through 8th grade. How will we be tracking that in the future? I mean, maybe it's the algebra keystone. Like, I'm just wondering, once they get into high school and they're no longer taking the PSSAs, what other data we might be considering?
Yeah, so those are the big state assessments, would be the PSSA and the Algebra 1 Keystone for math. And I didn't highlight it in the presentation, but that was one of the changes that helped the middle school, but also shifts some of that to the high school, is in our old sequence, when we had just full year Algebra 1 as our course, students took that Keystone exam at the end of Algebra 1. We know we have a number of 8th grade students that do that. In the old sequence. So that's where the double testing was. They had the 8th grade Keystone, or the 8th grade PSSA and the Algebra Keystone in that same year. With the integrated math, that Algebra Keystone moves to the end of integrated math 2. So the Algebra Keystone is in a different place in the new sequence. It's a year further back. So it takes a little longer to get there, but the students will actually have a stronger math background when they do take that assessment. Part of the challenge between last year and this year with comparative data is is just that. It was the first year through the program with the teachers and the students, and we've made changes. So it's hard to say, you know, it's tremendously different, but our assessments look a little different. The lessons look a little different. So it's hard to just compare what we've done so far because we're only a year and a half into this, and a big chunk of that time we went from face-to-face to virtual.
But I think that one of the things that Dr. McGowan and I have discussed is her commitment to make sure that we're using local district level data to help us track and to support student growth. Fair enough? Is that fair?
Yeah, that's the goal. Is to
so that's where we are.
Yeah.
Ms. Ackman?
Sorry for the late question, but I know there was some concern. This was a lot for teachers to take on, especially this year. And do you think how the kids came in could potentially inform some extension prep before next year, or some tweaks to maybe make it easier for next year, given that this has been a disruptive year as it is? Thanks. And it's amazing. Thank you for getting this done. It took a long time, as Melissa said, to get here, and it's really neat.
I'll give you the answer for that, Mrs. Ackman. We had Georgine, I'll screw up her last name. She's Heilbeck, is a BC teacher who was one of the early implementers. And I think one of the things that's been really nice to see is how well our teachers have gravitated toward this program. So while it may sound like a lot, they apparently rose to the challenge and did a lot.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. So thank you very much, Mr. Lilly, for that. That was a really informative and great presentation. And I'll hand it back to Mr. Copeland.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you too, Jason. So our second presentation is to give an update as to where we are in the investigation of planning for a return to full attendance, or as full attendance as people are interested in doing for the remainder of the year. It's been, at least in my mind, it's been about a year, a little over a year since this issue, coronavirus, COVID-19, became real for us. Not as real as it began in March, but it was still in the news. And then the spring occurred, and that was a shock. And then we worked through summer. And by the time we got to fall, the district had grown as we implemented the hybrid program. And now we're looking to see, under the right conditions, what it would take for us to phase away from the hybrid program to a full implementation, or a full implementation under the current circumstances. And I have to just share a conversation I had with a parent just before the winter break, who, if the board will remember and the public will remember, there was a lot of concern and angst that we were staying open, that we were in a hybrid model, and why shouldn't we close down? And this was a parent that I spoke to who had that concern. He lost a friend to COVID, and wanted to hear why I thought it was a good reason to keep the schools open. And I talked about it. I talked about what I saw in kids when they started in school, and how I was concerned about it. But when I saw what the teachers had done, and what I saw what the kids were able to do, even in a hybrid situation with distance learning, I wanted to see as much in person as possible. So now we're into a new era. We've got to deal with variants and other kinds of things, but we wanted to at least take the opportunity to share with the board and the public where we are in our thinking at this point in time. So with that, I'm going to ask Megan Schaefer, who's Assistant to the Superintendent for District Administration, to take us through the committee's update.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And as I'm doing that, just to reiterate Mr. Copeland's opening remarks, for us, this has been a journey of seeking a full reopening from the day we were closed back in March of last year. And so we've taken a number of steps to adapt and adopt new strategies to serve students as best we could in a safe as an environment as we could, and we're continuing that work. So this evening, I'm going to give you a little bit of a background of where we've been, take a closer look at where our schools are in terms of enrollment and how that plays into things such as the distancing we're able to provide in classrooms, and also look at some local data, current data. Also, I know that, and we all know that there's emerging and changing research on the subject of safe return to schools, and we'll take a brief look at that. And then we'll end with some of, a rundown of our ongoing work towards the goal of full return at this point in time. And so I'll start with just a look back. As Mr. Copeland mentioned, a year ago around this time, we began talking about the potential impact of the pandemic. And at that point in time, we were hopeful that it may be a maximum of 2 weeks of closure. Fast forward a few weeks to the governor closing down all schools in March of 2020. Very shortly after, we convened a reopening committee with the purpose of organizing personnel and resources to plan and implement a safe and efficient and equitable return to school. That reopening objective was sort of the mission of each one of these committees that was formed again in the spring of 2020 to begin the work on how do we bring back students into school safely, students and staff into school safely. So we had not only a reopening committee, but committees that were tasked with various pieces of the puzzle, including instructional program, operations, communications, etc. Importantly, we had a health and safety committee that has met at least weekly since the time that we convened these committees initially in the spring. Some of the committees don't meet as regularly, but do meet as needed, but the Health and Safety Committee has met throughout this pandemic in order to assess where we are with strategies, to address concerns that come up, to look at new and emerging research and apply that to our situation, and also to navigate the changing guidance that we receive from both the state and local level around our implementation strategies. So another thing that I thought would be helpful to reflect on are the assumptions that we had for reopening. I think many hold true. We're going to continue to follow recommendations of the state and federal government, as well as the local Office of Public Health. They do have authority over us jurisdictionally, so we will be deferring to their guidance and their rules. We will make efforts to continually restore and redesign instruction. We know that's ongoing work. We don't know the full impact of this pandemic, and we'll continue to seek ways to support students now, over the summer, and into the future. As we have done, we've prepared for various scenarios. We've implemented a hybrid scenario. We've implemented full virtual scenarios. We've given winter flex options to families. And we know that will have a range of responses from the community. And one of the things that we've tried to do is hear those concerns and address them as important considerations to what we are able to implement for the benefit of our students moving forward. And finally, we know that all of our plans are subject to continuous review and revision, which I shared some of those highlights already. Those assumptions became somewhat of our commitments to the school district community. We've certainly prioritized the health and safety pieces. We've provided various instructional platforms for learning for our students. And, we will continue to offer those fully virtual experiences for the duration of this year. Just to give a little bit of a picture, I know there are questions about where do we, who's informing our decisions, who are we sharing information with. There have been conversations about what other districts are doing, certainly, and we rely often, I shouldn't say often, but we rely on the conversations we're having with our colleague school districts across Montgomery County and across county lines. The Montgomery County Office of Public Health meets at least in 3 to 4 separate meetings with district leadership over the course of a week in conjunction with our connections to the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit. So there are constant and ongoing conversations among the Office of Public Health and the school districts in Montgomery County. We are also rely on the research and studies and expertise of others that are out there. The CHOP Policy Lab in particular has been very supportive of Montgomery County Office of Public Health and the MCIU in our work with them. So that is that doesn't limit us to who we are listening to, but that is the ongoing and regular conversations that we're having on a weekly, if not more often basis. So to take a closer look, I know that the CHOP Policy Lab guidance that was recently updated in, I believe, late January is something that is frequently cited. We've spoken to Dr. Rubin and have heard Dr. Rubin and his colleagues speak to larger audiences about their outlook, which I think there's some very good news. We're seeing the decline in positive cases. We're seeing, at least locally, we think there's a good commitment to mask wearing. Vaccination, I'll get to that, circle back on that topic in a minute. Warmer weather is on the horizon, although today didn't feel like it. But the Policy Lab, like others, are also very cognizant of the variants that are emerging and what impact they will have on school reopening plans. But before I even go further, that no one is saying stop thinking about it because those variants are emerging. It's a consideration. It's an important consideration, and it's something that we are paying attention to. So I would want you to be left with the impression that that's going to change our course necessarily at this point in time. One of the things that has caused frustration for us as a school community is the vaccine supply, which is not obviously a frustration limited to us, but it is something that we felt pretty confident that our staff would be in the process of getting vaccinated now, or at least getting their first dose. And because of the change in the prioritization of the vaccine, as well as the supply, it doesn't look like that's something that's going to be happening in the very near future. Now we're hearing good news about some other opportunities in other local areas. So we will continue to pursue opportunities for vaccinations for our staff. But right now we don't even have all of our 1A staff vaccinated. And the line, as you probably heard from local news reports, is pretty long in Montgomery County. That being said, and as I think the CHOP Policy Lab has said for a good time now, is leveraging multi-layered safety protocols as an important strategy. That not one thing is going to protect you absolutely, but many things can serve to provide a greater degree of protection, such as masking, social distancing, hygiene, all of those things that we believe that we've put into practice at a pretty high level within the district at this point in time. They caution that monitoring linked school transmission is an important piece of a successful or fuller reopening. And as I'll talk about a little bit later, that is something that is we're not seeing at a high level in our district at all. That's consistent with what we're hearing statewide and nationally, that school-based transmissions are low, and I believe is why we're seeing the recommendations that we're now seeing from experts that school reopening is safer than what they might have thought back in July. So the recommendation, at least the current recommendation from the CHOP Policy Lab is to consider an incremental expansion of in-person learning, as it allows us to see or observe in a controlled way how our safety protocols that we have in place stand up against increasing school populations. I think that's an important bit of advice in terms of what I'll show you in a minute about our school enrollment and how the exponential increase in enrollment may strain our safety protocols if we don't do it in a deliberate sort of stepped up fashion. And I think an important piece also I'll touch on a little bit more later is the assurance testing program, which Lower Merion has been a leader in bringing that to scale in a school district in the state of Pennsylvania. Just now, since the end of December, I feel like we've come a long way from the stage where we were part of the pilot that was getting the actual platform up and running to where we are now, testing almost 1,000 staff and students weekly. And we hope to continue to increase that as we move forward. So as I promised, we'd take a little bit of a deeper dive into our schools and enrollment, because I think that's important to help you the board think about what our challenges are. So I know this might be a little bit tiny to read on your screen, but what you're seeing here is our enrollment by school as of this month. And the blue block represents everyone that's in the hybrid program, all students in the hybrid program. The orange block represents the students that are in the Lmsb at home program by school. And you probably can't see it very well, but there's a sliver there that's gold that represents the LMBA enrollment. So what that shows you, I think, is that right now with our hybrid program, if you look at a school like Gladwin, which is the third bar in from the left, you'll see that we still have about almost 600 students that are in our hybrid program. So approximately 300 that are attending either the AM cohort or the PM cohort. So if to open up fully, we would have to be prepared to immediately accept almost 600 students in the building, assuming all of those families, and that's a question mark that we have, are willing to re-enter schools if we are not able to provide 6-foot distancing. And that's what we're really taking a close look at right now, is what that distancing factor is when we are, when we do need to bring back or have the space to bring back all of the students that are currently enrolled in the hybrid program. I also wanted to give you a snapshot of what the impact of the Flex program looks like for these schools, because I think it surprised me personally how many families elected the flex option. So this represents the February flex enrollment numbers, that green sliver, which is a little bit bigger at the, as you can see in the middle schools than across the elementary schools. For the month of January, we had 771 families elect the Winter Flex program. And Mr. Copeland spoke about the concerns that we were hearing about keeping our schools open in a hybrid model. There clearly were those concerns, and clearly a number of families who elected a flex option for the month of January. Now, in February, we saw that enrollment decrease, that flex enrollment decrease to about 450 students. So it does provide, if we were to assume that all of those students that continued in the flex program were ones that might perhaps not want to return to school under certain conditions, what does that give us a little more breathing room in our schools?
Yeah, because I think Megan, if I can say, yep. So what you don't see here, I think, is a lot of situations where we're nearing 50% of the students out. We're seeing a pretty high participation in the hybrid program. Now, when we do get to a survey situation, that may drop and may make it easier. But right now, that's pretty high. Is that fair?
That's fair. Yeah, absolutely. And just for as a reminder, at the high school level, you'll not see the green flex numbers because those students could opt to be in Lmsb at home as opposed to being flexed. So they weren't scheduled differently. They would simply enroll in the Lmsb at home program for that period of time. So that wasn't considered a separate option for them, but you could see those numbers did increase slightly, into January at the high school level. What I do think is important to note about the high school, for those that might be looking at that and thinking that's about half the students, it is. But if we look at our October Lmsb at home enrollment at the high school level, for example, the October enrollment, Harriton had about 132 students versus 450 currently in Lmsb at home, and Lower Merion had 250 students enrolled in Lmsb at home as opposed to the 726 currently enrolled. So, again, we don't know what specifically drove that. We've had a lot of conversations about why that's happening, but one of those theories is the weather warms, people may be more inclined to return to buildings. Other students are coming back to the building, friends, etc. Students may be more inclined to come back to the building. So that's also, a question mark as to whether those numbers would hold enough for us to be able to say, all students who want to be in the hybrid program can return at this point. We think those are fluctuating numbers. Just to drill down a little bit more for the reference of the board to elementary class sizes. So you can see, for example, if we look at the top line here of the blue section, this is Belmont Hills Elementary School. These are the number of students in each grade. So kindergarten has 37, first grade 61, the number of sections, meaning basically the number of teachers, and class sizes. So you can see, and these are all students that are in the hybrid program. This does not include Lmsb at home or LMBA students. So you can see, like, for example, in first and second grade, you have class sizes of 20 or 21 students. So we're looking closely at what that means in terms of the spacing that we are able to maintain with class sizes at that level. You have class sizes that range up to 24, 23, 24 students per class across the elementary schools. And again, this is a point in time look at what the class sizes are and what we are doing some investigatory measurements and to see what that looks like for a full reopening. This next chart is basically the same information, less taking out those flex students. Again, with the idea of, does that open up more room? So, for example, at Belmont Hills, those first grade class classes went from an average of 20 to 18 or 19. This is just thinking that that might be the students who would elect to stay home, giving us extra room. And then the question is, for those students who may not feel comfortable, families that might not feel comfortable returning, should we reduce the distance lower than 6 feet? What programs would be available, if any, to those students? Looking at shifting from looking at sort of what some challenges are with our relative to our enrollment to the current positivity rates within the county. This is Montgomery County. I think the good news is that you can see that rates are declining on the right side of that chart there. However, they still remain above where we were at Halloween. So we're still seeing high positivity across the county, but at the same time, like that, CHOP's guidance was suggesting that we're going to experience some declining positivity rates, which again provide better conditions for more fully reopening schools. This is another data point that we monitor, we're required to monitor, that the Pennsylvania Department of Health issues. This is tied to the attestation form that we submitted in late November. As you can see, Montgomery County has been in a substantial phase since the week ending November 6th. Before that, it was in moderate. I think an important point to recall is that while the Pennsylvania guidance was that substantial transmission for a period of more than 2 weeks required us to move to remote learning. The attestation process that this board approved allowed us to remain open for in-person learning, despite the fact that we remained in substantial transmission during that period of time. The other data that we monitor is what's happening within the district, and many of you are familiar with the dashboard. This is, while we're not seeing in-school transmission, we know that we have cases. I think the number is over 250 now. This was a screenshot from February 3rd. And it's also something that we dedicate resources to evaluating and following up. So the contact tracing that's being done is largely tasked to the district. So for each one of those 250 cases, school district staff is on the front lines of doing the contact tracing in concert with the Office of Public Health. And so we are, very familiar with the cases and the reality of the impact of those cases on staff and of students. So we're very, very mindful of the community that we're serving, both students and staff, as we move forward with our reopening discussions, or further reopening discussions. I mentioned earlier the vaccine news is disappointing to us. From a school district perspective, we want to see, especially our phase 1A staff, that either by job category, by age, or by health condition, are receiving their vaccine as soon as possible in that phase 1A category. But as of last week, Montgomery County, as well as some other local counties, received an allotment of about 1,000 doses when they had requested 15,000. And the line is, 160,000 Montgomery County residents long. So we're not optimistic that that's that we're going to get our staff vaccinated sooner rather than later. So I mentioned earlier, we look at other indicators beyond what's offered locally to us, and the state, the CDC has issued guidance and has promised again to issue additional guidance to schools in the near future, which we will evaluate carefully. And we believe that what we've done to date and what we will continue to do is follow that guidance as well. The guidance that I'm being told from public health officials is that 6 feet still remains the recommended social distancing standard, and that, you know, to the extent that we're going to look at something less than that, we have to be very you know, mindful that other conditions are in place to be able to do that successfully. One of the recent updated guidance pieces is from Harvard and Brown, a joint endeavor to update earlier guidance that was issued in July 2020. So I think it's important just to serve, you know, I guess to share that we do our best to keep up with what's current and what's best for students. The July guidance that was issued, because many people have been talking about this, did recommend that if that schools be closed once the average daily case rate rose above 25 cases per 100,000 people at the county level. If we had been following this guidance since July, we would have never opened. So this is an example of a table from that they've referenced in beginning with their guidance back in July as to, you know, if you're in red, you should be closed. We're still in red, and we've been open since September 14th is when we started in-person instruction for some groups of students, and have increased to the model that we're at today. So again, if we had been following that guidance, that's the 25, that line, that little bit below that black dotted line, that's the 25 cases. Obviously, we've been well above that for this time. I referenced earlier the attestation form. This is a little bit of a summary of our commitment as a district to provide in-person instruction opportunities to the greatest extent possible and safe. We, as I mentioned earlier, we signed the attestation form allowing us to proceed with in-person learning despite the recommendation of the state to be in a remote only instructional model. It was December 18th approximately when they updated that guidance, saying that they've changed their position on that level of transmission being a threshold, and have since made recommendations about reopening that I think people are excited about, and we are too. I mean, look, we would like to get more and more students back. As a parent of middle school students, I'd like to see my kids go back full time as well. But the reality is we still need to be cautious in our approach. Part of that is ramping up our testing program, which we're very proud of having taken the initiative to bring it to the district, to scale it up. That was a tremendous effort by many of our nurses to be trained and now provide training to conduct the testing, whether it be during school hours, after school hours, to provide it to our athletes as well as our staff. We weren't able to fully launch that until the second week of January, actually the third week, full week of January, I believe. So that is relatively in its infancy stage, although we, you know, at this point, testing about 1,000 staff and students per week. We feel pretty good about that, and we're going to continue to ramp up those efforts. We're pursuing all the opportunities that we can find to get our staff vaccinated. We've reached out to, we've worked closely with the Office of Public Health, but we've reached out to pharmacies, every pharmacy that's been mentioned on the Pennsylvania provider list. We've connected with, seeking opportunities for our staff, especially our phase 1A staff, to get vaccinated. In January, just we brought back to the board the athletics health and safety plan. Now that we had testing in place, we've been providing that, so we give students that opportunity for to compete with their peers, and another outlet for those students. We're going to continue to look to expand that for students. And again, one of the other things that we've been working on is honoring the concerns of families that wanted an option other than to be in a hybrid model, and that was the winter flex, which we've discussed. So this is the final slide of the presentation, and speaks to our continuing work, the details of which aren't here tonight, but we certainly can and will continue to provide that information to you. We need to reassess our furniture configurations in all classroom spaces, identify source furniture needs. One of the things that we're faced with is that in many elementary school classrooms have been outfitted with tables as opposed to desks in order to encourage collaborative learning. That's a different challenge in terms of spacing than the desks are. So we need to figure out some alternative strategies for those situations. We're working with vendors to secure tents as optional facilities for whether it be classroom space, dining space, and others. But that also is not just a matter of finding a tent and putting it up. We need to find a site location, electricity needs, ventilation, temperature control, if that's even possible. Other possible protective measures such as plexiglass dividers. We're heavily into conversations about the use of those in classrooms. One of the things that it reminded me of is the face shields. We produced hundreds of those in the summer of 2020, thinking that was the right approach to protect ourselves in the classroom and other places. And obviously the guidance on masking has since changed. Not that the face shields can't be used in addition to masks, but that is the sort of conversations we're having, because the trade-offs of cost versus effectiveness are important to consider. We're looking to provide additional opportunities for students to have a greater connection to school based on needs. We're exploring increased extracurricular intramural opportunities for students, especially at the middle school level, moving forward. We're continuing to expand rapid testing for staff and students, and continuing to work to ensure staff receive vaccinations. We intend to survey families and staff regarding a return to learning where 6 foot social distance is not possible. And we will continue to work to create towards a fuller reopening, possibly following spring break. And I believe that is the last slide I have to share with you. See if
Unmute myself. Thank you, Megan. Just to before I turn it over to the board, some of the things Megan's given you some big pictures, and she's given you some specific kinds of issues. Big picture, what we're looking at is this is a district that was overcrowded to begin with. That's why we're building a new middle school. So we didn't have a lot of space. We also don't have high numbers compared to some of my colleagues, high numbers of people in the hybrid program. We've got relatively low numbers in the virtual program. We've got relatively high numbers in the hybrid program, which makes dedensification that much more of a challenge. we are going to put out a survey. One of the things that we're looking to do is to make sure we have as much information in it, so that people, when we ask, would you be willing to do X, we can also answer, and here's what that means if that happens. And I think we can do that relatively soon. And so we're taking a look at that. We're waiting to see what further guidance we get from CDC. Our reopening committee, our health and safety committee, is meeting at 8 o'clock tomorrow. In fact, they're going to continue to come up with some questions, and we've got representatives from CHOPS meeting with the reopening committee later in the morning to answer some of those questions and some of the other things that we're looking to do. So with that, Mrs. Klein, you asked for it. This is your.
I am welcoming all the questions here. So I will start with Ms. Kalish.
Thank you. Sorry, I was just getting my notes down so it didn't go out of my head. I really appreciate that very thorough presentation. I know that this has been a really difficult and fast-moving problem we've been dealing with in the district. And what I was hoping for, and I know specifics are going to be pretty much impossible, is if I could get just kind of an idea of what the administration is looking for as looking towards to have in place for a full opening. Are there anything that are make or break? Are we looking to have all of our staff that want vaccinations to be vaccinated before we go in? What are the major considerations, and how is the administration thinking about it right now?
So we're looking at here are the things we're looking to fall into place. One, that we've got a robust testing program. We think we're on the way for that. Two, that frankly the weather warms, which will allow us. There's science behind that, according to the people from CHOP, in terms of the weather getting warmer, but it also allows us to make use of flex space outside the building. The cafeterias are a concern for folks. It's one of the concerns I think that happened in the fall. We had a lot of, particularly the high school kids, making use of outdoor facilities, and then that was sort of, you couldn't do that in the winter. So those are the things that we're looking for. We're also looking to see if there are any other mitigation techniques that we can use that we haven't used yet. If somebody gets vaccinated tomorrow, what's tomorrow? The 9th, they're not going to get another shot until March 9th, and then it's 2 weeks after that. So I don't think waiting for the vaccine is a viable strategy, because I just don't see that happening under this set of circumstances, which is unfortunate. Shane, did that answer? Did I leave anything out?
Yeah, that was really helpful. I appreciate that, and I share your woe and frustration that we have not been able to, and our leadership in our state and county have not been able to get our teachers vaccinated.
Right. But I do think, what I'm hearing is we're going to get pretty good guidance. And I think, I'm optimistic. We just want to sort of get it real right.
I appreciate that approach. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Kalish. Mr. Lee.
Thank you. First, I just wanted to thank everyone for the comprehensive update. And I want to commend everyone for the hard work that went into our health and safety planning and now executing effectively. I understand all the planning and complexities that'll be involved in a full opening. It's not going to be something we could just flip the switch on. But in the interim, I did note the high participation of Lmsb at home in the high schools. Given that, and certainly recognizing that number is going to fluctuate, you don't have any certainty around ongoing participation in that. It does seem like potentially we have some opportunity to offer kids the option of coming 4 days a week in high school until that number decreases, the Lmsb at home population. Have we considered that, and where are we with planning around
Yeah,
that?
we have. What I've asked the principals to do is to start monitoring and taking census of each class, and who's coming in and who's staying home. And if everybody who came in 2 days came in 4 days, what would that do? So that we can move to that. Now, what the caveat on that is the number of teachers that we get absent every day that can range from 15 to 20 teachers that we can't find subs for. So if those teachers are teaching from home and the kids show up, we could potentially run out of spillover room for them to go find a place to zoom in to see the teacher who's at home and they're in school. So that's the other part of it that the principals are working on. But with the numbers staying as low as they are, we think that there's a real possibility of increasing those numbers.
Do you have a sense of timeline for that?
I think if we followed the numbers through the rest of the week, we might be able. Don't push me on that, Mr. Lee, but I think we'd like to do that sooner rather than later. We've been bringing in students based on identified need, and we've been doing that for some time. And we've been increasing that number for some time. But we would like to do that more.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Next is Ms. Ackman.
Thank you and good evening. And again, thanks to everyone for all you're doing. This is a challenging year and a lot of changing information constantly. I guess I have a few questions. One is, I guess, a little bit more around urgency and timeline. We're, I guess, 7 weeks away from spring break. So that's going to go pretty quickly. I just wanted to get a better sense of, when the survey would go out to parents. I like that we're looking ahead to come up with a plan. If we had given further thought to like beyond lunch outside, utilization of outdoor space, especially for classes, since we're not quite sure what's going to happen in the fall. And I wanted to, we're so lucky to have this testing program, and that's, in the mix of tools that Dr. Rubin and CDC talk about of really helping districts go back to more in person. So if any further information of how that mix could really help us get there would be great.
I heard survey, outdoor space, and guidance. Is that your?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of urgency because for some kids and families, as much as, compared to some other districts, it's lucky that we have hybrid. The situation is still really hard. So just some more details on where we are, where we're trying to get to, how the testing program is working to get us to full time, and the use of outdoor space. Thank you.
Okay, so I got 4 things. So the survey, in terms of the survey, we have to nail down some other space considerations. So for example, and it's almost a school by school situation. So in some situations, you've got, you can get 18 students in a class who are 3 feet away. In other classrooms, you can't get that many. In some classrooms, as Megan said, you've got tables, not desks, so that changes the configuration. And we have to nail that down a little bit more, and it also shifts in grades. And we've asked the facilities people to go back and look at the space considerations one more time. In terms of outdoor space, the facilities has met with every principal. They've identified where tenting could go at every building so far. And in fact, on the facilities agenda, you will see an item for that tenting. We're still trying to figure out some areas for the high school because of the amount of space. But the supply chain seems fine. And we think that no matter what we do, we'd make use of that equipment for different, different school uses anyway. So we're set to do with that. The guidance, as I said, we've got CHOP coming to the district tomorrow virtually to give us a highlight on some more things. We want to talk a little bit more about things like plexiglass as to whether that's really something we should invest in or that's really something that's not necessarily going to give the biggest bang for your buck, or how to best use that. In terms of testing, I have those districts, and it's only about, I don't know, Megan, 4 or 5, I think, that are showing interest in student testing, and we're one of them. So we're looking at expanding testing, and we're looking at student testing in certain areas, and I've got a meeting on that tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Gilbert?
Thank you very much. I just want to say, because I am very aware of the frustration many families and the hardships on many families that the pandemic has caused. And I just want to assure people that Mr. Copeland has been in constant contact with health officials and other superintendents. I think you meet at least once a week around the county, maybe twice. I know. So I think we are all well aware of what others are doing, and there are lots of different reasons why, that have to do with the type of facilities and even the acceptance of risk going down to the 3 feet. So I really appreciate all of the just flexibility and creativity that across the district, from the leadership, teachers, staff, bus drivers, everybody has been doing and trying to make this work as many ways as possible, because different families have different concerns. So my question is around communication, because I thought this this presentation this evening was really excellent in informing people. I can imagine that the PowerPoints without any context would be difficult for somebody to read them and understand what we're doing. And if there's a way to somehow package this this presentation in something that may be more digestible, or more, if people can see it in an email. I'm not sure how it would be done, or if it's even possible. Amy, I'm looking at you. I can I know that this is really difficult. The other thing, I was wondering if we might be able to do something like that, because I'm actually concerned about the survey and putting it out too soon, because I recall that what happened before, and people were even concerned at that point that we were waiting too long, was that people took the survey, said that they wanted to do, LMSD at home or hybrid, or whichever choice they were making. And then by the time we got to actually implementing it, people were really upset because circumstances had changed and they wanted something else. And it was really difficult to accommodate that because of, classroom size for teachers and all those kinds of things. So I just wanted to, if you could talk about a possible update making sure the survey isn't done too early, are just two things I was wondering about.
Mr. Copeland, you're muted.
Something they've been trying to do to me since a young age. So I guess it's probably not realistic to think that we'll have all the information we need for a survey, but I'd like to get at least enough so that we can answer as many questions um, before we do it. One of the things we did in the fall was we did sort of an overall, and then the buildings held a separate meeting so that parents could ask specific questions about those buildings. I haven't discussed that with the principals yet, but I guess in the back of my head, that would be a way, because not all buildings are the same. Which door do I go into? What about the this? What about the that? The lockers, that we went through. How do we handle that? Not so hard to do, I don't think, at the high school. I don't think anyway, but I would imagine there'd be a lot of questions K-8 about specifics. So I guess that's my thinking at this
And
point.
I see that Ms. Buckman is trying to tell you that
She's trying to tell me that she's going to put something out tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow. So, which is great. Thank you. But I do think that there's got to be some context, because I think just seeing those slides would be really difficult to understand how that's impacting our decision making. But thank you very much.
Ms. Ackman, do you have another question?
I did, sorry. One thing that's, I think, been a little confusing for all of us is the, trying to manage anything and related to schools is the layers of approval from the state and the county. And then there was that attestation form and, the state's chart. And, as we all know, there are, schools are doing a lot of different things. There are some other schools in our county and other county that some kids are back 5 days, some are not, some are all virtual. I'm wondering, once we come up with our plan, where do we have to get input or feedback from the county? Do we have to get input, feedback, or approval from the state? Like, what are the process steps, or do we just let them know what we're doing based on our local conditions? So if you can just provide some, because I think it's been confusing when the county stepped in and mandated all schools go virtual. That was a surprise for some people as well.
So in terms of the plan for a return, the only requirements that I'm aware of is large group spaces, gathering spaces. So for instance, I have a meeting tomorrow on high school graduation. And we're beginning to plan on what some strategies might be on that. And that's the kind of a large plan that we would have to have. I'm not aware of any other plan that needs to be required. I can ask that question. However, they made it clear that if we went below the 6 feet, when it came to contact tracing, it would be 6 feet. So in other words, you're going to capture more students in close proximity if you reduce your space from 6 to 3. So they cautioned us, you're going to a more dense population may create a situation where we say you're going to have to quarantine those kids, and ultimately they would have. So we do our own contact tracing, which requires a lot of effort on the staff. Once we have gathered that information, Terry Quinlan, our supervisor of health services, will contact the health department and say, here's what we've got at school X. What's your recommendation? And they do have the authority to close us. If we said, now we really want to stay open, they'd say, you know what, based on what we have, we're going to close you. Okay. Megan, you have something? Let me just ask Megan to speak to what I was.
No, I don't know if you were responding to what I just mentioned to you, but it's possible that we would have to revise and resubmit our health and safety plan.
Oh, yes.
As a result of the change of the distancing.
Okay, but as far as we're concerned, the board is the only one that really needs to approve the return to school plan. There's not another step required.
As far as we know, with the exception of those caveats that I mentioned.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ackman, and I will take the opportunity then to ask a couple of questions myself. And I'm approaching this from the viewpoint of we're in the middle of a pandemic and there are no good choices, and that no matter what choice you make, there are always other pieces to it that are a compromise or a give and take. And sort of the follow up on if we went from 6 feet to 3 feet, that one, it's very possible that there would be more quarantining among classes that might happen. But also from just a physical perspective, based on the numbers now of who is in the hybrid program, could we fit all those students in all of our classrooms? Like, are there, because I worry a little bit that if there are a couple of classrooms in certain schools that just can't accommodate that many kids, even with 3 feet, how do we manage that?
That's what we're trying to really nail down now. We've asked the principals to take a first dive at it. Some of the numbers cause us to say, you know what, we need to go back and take a look at that with more specificity. When we did, people may not realize it if you don't have a kid in kindergarten. Our kindergarten program is operating this year as if it were any other year. We have a half-day kindergarten program, AM and PM, and what happened is we were able to run the kindergarten program AM and PM 5 days a week, and we've been doing that virtually since the beginning of school. What we did, though, if the students, I'll pick a number. Let's say there were 17 students in the kindergarten class, and the class was judged to be able to hold 12 and stay 6 feet apart. So you had 4 or 5 kids over the limit. What we did was we took supplemental staff, and we either used a room that was no longer being used because so many teachers had gone to Lmsd, or another facility, and we rotated the number of students within the class so that we could de-densify the class all day long while still having the class of 16 or 17 students. Whether you could do that beyond kindergarten or not is one of the things that we're trying to measure out if the class was just a few more. But if it's not, then we at least need to know that. The other concern we have, and again, we won't know until we get our survey, is if there are a number of people who, and I've gotten some emails, not a lot, but I've gotten some where people have said, hey, just to let you know, the district promised 6 feet. If you don't give me 6 feet, I don't want a virtual program, but I don't want 3 feet. And so we would have to make some decisions around that situation also. Is that, I don't know if I...
That is the type of complexity that I'm trying to get at, because I think that there are so many, every decision sort of creates a domino effect. And one of the other pieces to that I wanted to sort of delve into a little bit is what would happen if we had a bunch of students, families who then chose, I'm not comfortable with 3 feet. So that maybe gives us more. AirPods just died. So I think that would give us more flexibility in terms of physical space. If we had a number of families that then said, well, I'm not comfortable being in school at 3 feet. So, and so maybe that might soften some of the issues around physical space. But what does that do for
a program?
The program, right?
Right.
So you have, and I think that those are the types of things that need to be thought through. And I know that you're thinking about that. I just want to sort of put those different ideas out there.
Yeah, because there's really not an LMVA option because that semester has begun and gone. The LMSD is filled to the brim, and so there's really not room there. That's something that the curriculum folks are taking a look at, a what if. So going back to both the issue of I want to survey with urgency, but I want to be careful the survey doesn't give me a false positive or a false negative. We want to nail that as close to the right answer as we can, so we have some, options in ways to go.
Thank you. And then I have two quick questions, I hope. One around the use of plexiglass and whether that is I know that in other areas they're using it, but I also know that there are some downsides to that. So I was wondering.
Yeah, I asked the question, and one individual, one of the specialists says, that's really kind of cosmetic. Yes, it might stop, something from a student who actually sneezes or something like that. Thought it was perhaps a better solution for teachers than for students. That's one of the issues that we want to delve into. That's going to come up tomorrow, as a matter of fact. But when you talk to people from the industry, not the plexiglass industry, they think it's a good idea. But from the more medical, we've not received a lot of, that's a good thing to do.
Great. Thank you. And then I have one last question, which is actually a follow-up from the previous board meeting, and that's around the availability of N95 masks for our teachers, if they are interested in them.
We've got a pretty good store of N95 masks. They're used mostly some bus drivers and some grounds crew and so forth. They are, to be effective, what my health folks tell me is they really have to be fitted on the face. They can't be worn as loosely as a surgical mask if it's really going to act as an N95. They're hot, they're very uncomfortable, and they're very difficult to use if you're going to wear it all day and talk to students. So our guidance folks have said we really don't think that that's an appropriate use for teaching staff. They can have them if they want them, but given what they're really for and who really should use them, it's really not a good substitute.
Great, thank you very much for that clarification. And I think that we are, I don't see any other board questions. So I want to thank you, Mr. Copeland, and Ms. Schaefer very much for the presentation tonight. As others said, I thought it was very thorough and sort of puts everything into perspective. So at this time, we're going to move to audience recognition. So we'll allot 10 minutes for audience recognition public comment. As in the past, Ms. Lampera will open the chat feature, and we ask two things. One, that each person does one comment, and also that you just put where your name and where you reside in the district. And just to clarify, you don't need to put your road or anything like that. Just, Lucy Klein, I live in Ardmore type of thing. And again, so that there's a one comment question limit per person. And following the 10 minutes, these will all be read by Mr. Roos. So Ms. Lampera, if you could set that up, please. Okay, thank you, everyone. Welcome back to the live portion of this meeting, I suppose. Mr. Roos, if you could please go ahead and read the comments. Oh, I can't hear you.
He's not back yet. It doesn't look like.
No, I'm back.
No, he's here.
I'm just on two different. I'm on
Sorry,
two
I didn't see you over there.
See chat and see the board at the same time. Is my volume okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Start with Katie Calabrese Winwood. I'd like to request more regular email updates regarding further reopening schools this year and critically the plans for fall 2021. This is by far the most important issue facing the district right now. We are 1 year into the pandemic, 6 months into the school year, and 7 months away from the next one. LM families need district leadership to take decisive, aggressive, creative action, and we need to receive regular communications about what's being planned. The families need to see this as being tackled with a sense of urgency, proactiveness, and agility. We are a highly resourced district. Success is within our grasp. Next is Leanne Shore Winwood. I feel that the survey is of the utmost urgency, a survey that offers options and notifications if possible. Michelle doesn't have a, oh, I'm sorry, a survey that offers notifications of possible changes in plans. We can speculate until it's too late. Some of these comments are broken up. Michelle Davis, Bala Kinwood. Why can't we see how many families want to flex for the rest of the year and open that spot for a student who desperately needs it?
In person.
In person, got it, okay. Jamie Scheller, Bryn Mawr. What is the plan to reopen the schools more days in person, and why isn't the process and who is in charge transparent? Why can't parents attend this school board meeting in person, or at a minimum speak live on Zoom, or to ask questions to you directly? You're making decisions that profoundly affect our children, and we can't even voice our concerns live. Hello, I am Bugh Brasinger, and I am from Bryn Mawr. I was recently accepted into the 4 days of in-person school, and I'm really excited for it. However, I heard that other students who were interested in doing the same thing were denied the ability to. My question is that why are some of these students denied access to the 4 days of in-person school? Should I keep reading, or Mr. Copeland, did you want to respond to some of these? Or
Sorry, I think for the last one, it's the discussion that I had with Mr. Lee, that we are certainly moving in that direction, but the principals are doing a census count.
Next is Joshua Blinder, Winwood. When do you anticipate having firm plans for fall 2021 with respect to full reopening for in-person school? Next, Robin Knight, Winwood. Is there a plan to track and or benchmark where the learning losses are and how to make them up? Next.
So one of the things that we did not do tonight because of the length of the presentation is at the curriculum committee meeting, Dr. McGloin and Dr. Gaudioso did in fact go through some of the monitoring and checking that we're doing throughout the year that will help provide a basis for whatever extended year programs, that's a term of art I probably shouldn't have used, relating more to special services, but whatever programmatic changes we want to make as a result of that. And that presentation is in board docs, I believe, that folks can take a look at, and we may revisit that. In terms of what we're going to do for 2021, I have to say that when we were planning for the fall of 2020, because of the we must have had 4 or 5 plans over the summer before we got to August, and then had to change again and pivot for that. It's my hope that this fall is going to be this fall coming is going to model much more falls of the past, even with probably still some masking, but I think we should be in much better shape for the fall coming up.
Okay. Jamie Selway, Haverford. We appreciate the detailed recap of the past 12 months and update on Lower Merion School District staff's current thinking. We very much support a community survey to obtain information to guide your reopening strategy. Given the urgency of a full return to in-person school, the Lower Merion School District provide an initial return proposal so that the survey can be used to refine and improve the proposal. The sooner the community can review a detailed plan and timetable, the better. Parent representatives on board subcommittees are also an available resource. Thanks for all of your hard work toward this important achievement. Next, Rachel McQuillan, who is from Bala Kinwood. Do you feel confident that all students will have a full-time in-person option in the fall of 2021, knowing teachers would be vaccinated by then, but students would not? Next, Alexis Shapiro, Winwood. Is there any consideration for making Fridays an additional in-person day with alternating cohorts for middle school? If not, is there a way to at least make it synchronous learning day?
I should say that Fridays, Dr. Gaudioso, can you give an example of some of the activities that teachers are currently using in Fridays and why Fridays become important to us?
Sure. Fridays are a day because of the supervision requirements during the week. What used to happen during the week were morning meetings, and I should clarify, morning faculty meetings, IEP meetings, parent meetings, and those would happen before the school day. They could happen through the day occasionally, sometimes with coverage. Because of the hybrid schedule, instruction is so tightly mapped through the day that these meetings cannot occur. And any of the teacher planning time that normally would be in a typical day, the teachers are doing an extraordinary amount of planning to manage the cohort at home, the students who are in the classroom, and all of that happens on Fridays. The faculty meetings, achievement team meetings, IEP meetings, these are scheduled with families, very difficult to reschedule sometimes. And they are focused on all of those things that support students. You know, somebody brought up the, monitoring student achievement, and all of those systems in place are really critical to making sure we're meeting student needs. And all of that has been pushed to Friday. So there is some instruction and some synchronous time taking place, but really all of the other workings of the school day have ended up on Friday.
Thanks, Jim.
Next, Amy Krinsky, Bala-Cynwyd. When will you be updating the format of these virtual board meetings? Many neighboring school districts allow stakeholders to speak during meetings and have extended time to hear from the community. This format makes people feel that you don't want feedback and aren't willing to be collaborative or transparent. Next is Peter Solderich, Haverford, parent of Gladwin student. I first want to thank the district for implementing Flex for families whose risk profile has evolved since the school year started in September, and encourage you to continue to consider those families as you explore back to school options. In terms of reopening, I would strongly urge the district to adhere to county, state, and federal guidelines, including the forthcoming updated guidance from CDC. Lmsd should provide full transparency and updates on empirical ventilation measurements in classrooms and common spaces. Lmsd should provide outdoor options, especially for scenarios in which masks are removed, like at mealtime. Regarding mask policies, the district should pursue the potential for distribution of better masks, not only for staff, but students as well. Despite Mr. Copeland's assertions, there are very well-performing KN95 and KF94 masks that can be worn comfortably for very long periods of time. Thank you for recognizing parent voices. Next is Nancy Polochronopoulou, Bala-Cynwyd. I'm especially worried about the possible reduction of the 6 feet recommended distance. This number is a result of extensive studies, and reducing it simply feels risky and arbitrary. Why 3 feet? There's no justification for this random choice other than it may give the district the option to reopen. All the research that supports school reopening assumes that the general comment cuts off. Yeah, comment cuts off. Catherine Jordan Narberth, can you discuss testing in more detail and how that will enable a faster reopening? Of the 1,000 tests being administered each week, how many are for staff, how many are for students? Have you implemented asymptomatic testing for students in the middle and elementary schools? And if not, what is the timeline for doing that? Next is Ursana Teitelbaum, Ardmore. As physician parents of 3 children interested in STEM, we are deeply concerned about current science and math education. Good grades are not reflective of what they are learning, since we personally know the content they should be taught, and especially since they tell us about rampant cheating. Virtual laboratories just aren't a thing in lab-based sciences. 2 days per week inadequate. Please describe plan to address STEM teaching at LMSD. Please also address cheating. Some kids are choosing to stay home to boost their grades. Saying it is a pandemic and expectations are lower isn't acceptable to us, since many of their national peers in public schools, local and distance, and the majority of private schools are receiving robust in-person education. I think the upcoming AP scores will be very revealing. My daughter says many high school kids planning not to take AP tests because of concerns about education equity. LMSD may not fare well on national stage.
So unfortunately, I was muted for the other one. Let me go back to the testing issue. So one of the things, we test, the students that we test right now are student athletes at both high schools. And we began with once a week. I think we're going to increase that to twice a week. So those are the students who are currently being tested. I'd say, so that leaves probably around 600 to 700 staff. I'm looking for Mrs. Schaefer, no, so 600
Yes,
to 700
that's correct.
staff. That staff, though, includes bus drivers, it includes secretaries, it includes administrators, it includes, and it includes teachers. And we're looking for ways to improve that. There's also, we think that there's some, or I've been told that there's some benefit to student testing to reduce the amount of time in quarantine. Just at the beginning stages of understanding that, so I can't really speak to that in any great depth. In terms of the cheating, this was actually brought to our attention back in the fall, and we actually had staff development because this is one of the areas where we wanted to take advantage, quite frankly, of the situation we're in, so that we could help teachers develop assessments that where the teacher could say, use any book you want, use any resource you want. It's more important to get your thinking process than it is for you to regurgitate content. So I think the last large staff development focused in part on that.
Okay. Katie Daly, Penn Valley. Thank you to both the district personnel and the board for tonight's meeting. Since we are allowed only one comment, and it's already been made very obvious that parents want kids back 5 days per week in person, and we have all the resources in Lmsb to reopen safely, instead I would like to ask a tactical question relevant only for the very short duration between now and when we reopen 5 days per week. We've had recent closings due to weather-related issues and likely will have more in the near future. My son received 90 minutes of virtual instruction instead of the already minimized 3 hours in person, and somehow that was counted as a day of instruction. Can the district please consider opening on Fridays during weeks when the weather forces us to close on days other than Friday?
I think Dr. Gaudioso explained the complexities of Fridays.
Daniel Chang, Penn Valley. Thank you for all your hard work and planning. However, with all due respect, I see minimal actions that demonstrate any amount of urgency. Facilities, building, classroom measurements were taken last summer. Children will be denied more in-person education if the school district waits until sometime after spring break. We are quickly approaching 12 months of this crisis, and our children are not receiving the required 180 days and 900 hours of instruction as required by law. Please perform your duties with more urgency. The science supports the school environment to be safer than the community. Our children are suffering daily. Please do not drag your feet further. There is no need to delay weeks for a survey. You know you can send the survey next week. Other school districts in our region have opened full-time successfully. We can do it as well. Please, I urge you to take the appropriate action so our children can receive the proper education they deserve.
I respectfully disagree that anybody's dragging their feet or that there's a lack of urgency. We have been working diligently to try and put together a plan that is not only getting kids in school, but it's one doing it safely. As I indicated earlier, one of the core faxes, pointing to a different school district is interesting. Sometimes we can learn from one another, but we also have different circumstances and different factors.
Okay. Diana Rogovich, Marion Statement. Mr. Copeland and the board, you have provided options for those parents who do not feel comfortable sending their children in person. It seems to be a small fraction of the families as per your graph. A large number of parents want and need their children to attend in person, yet you still don't have a solid plan and a solid option for us. We are a year into this pandemic. You are not rushing a plan. You are months behind the curve on this. Other districts have made and executed solid plans. This is very disappointing. Next is Vanessa Cohn, Bala-Kinwood. Thank you very much for all the presentations, the informative presentations tonight. Very pleased with the math curriculum update. Regarding reopening, I seem to have missed the rationale for why districts would be considering dropping the safe distance from students from 6 to 3 feet. Are other districts making similar decisions? And if so, what are the rates of transmission and quarantining students been there? Somewhat related, has there been any update from CHOP experts to the CHOP/experts to the research about transmission of transmission of COVID among children and teens? Also, have there been comparative studies of transmission rates among in-person students versus those in all virtual settings. Lastly, I value the in-person opportunities that my daughters have in the hybrid setting, but if the district dropped to a 3-foot minimum, neither I nor my children would feel comfortable going. Elizabeth Gunderson, Penn Valley. I would like to see more urgency in getting students back in classrooms full time. The research is clear that the benefits of in-person education outweigh the risk to children and teachers when mitigation measures are in place. I say this as a developmental psychologist who researches learning and motivation in children. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends 3 feet of distancing to make this feasible. Multiple neighboring districts have already begun full-time instruction, and Lower Merion should do so as soon as possible. Next is Dreaded McQuillan Balakinwood. Does the administration sense the urgency that families are feeling regarding the return to school, given the emotional and mental toll it's taking on kids, not to mention the academic regression? Alicia Nathanson, Balakinwood. Thank you for this meeting. I fully support IP learning and hope we can make significant changes for this to happen before spring break. I am not clear why other school districts in the surrounding area are operating 4 to 5 days a week and we are not. Keep going. Sean Sexton, Penn Valley. Why is it that has not been able to create an option for full in-person or at least elementary schools when the following neighborhood school districts have already been able to offer full in-person? In fact, in Upper Merion, Central Bucks, Council Rock, Wissahickon, Souderton, Springford, Penridge, what is the point of implementing our ACE testing program if we aren't using it to help us for a full reopen now? Our children.
And let me mention that there are districts that have different sets of circumstances. You mentioned some of the neighboring districts. One of them that you mentioned is fully open and they can maintain 6 feet of distance.
Okay. Our children are again continuing to fall behind in their learning. They suffer from isolation, depression, emotional issues, etc. The collateral damage is real, dangerous, and long lasting. Are you as a school board going to wait until we suffer a few teenage suicides before you feel a sense of urgency to reopen our schools? Next is Jordan Krimsky, Balakinwood. Mr. Copeland seems to be concerned about surveying the community too quickly. We haven't had a survey sent out since last summer, early fall. Other districts are regularly doing surveys. Don't we need this data to make better decisions and to be more agile? Jennifer Freed, Winwood. Thank you for your work throughout this tough school year. I'm very happy to see that the district is moving in the direction of fully in-person instruction. While I appreciate the district's careful and thorough efforts, I do hope that you will expedite this transition wherever possible. I would echo the hope already expressed that high school students will be offered a 4-day option as soon as possible in light of the extraordinarily low in-person attendance at both high schools. I hope to see this option publicized and widely used. Next, Mark Fasano, Winwood. Their lack of urgency here is mystifying and infuriating. Families and children in this district are suffering and regressing. Families are cracking under an unendurable strain. We are at the point where kids' attitudes toward and experiences of school are hardening to something negative, perhaps irretrievably negative. The public should know that the Radnor administration presented an all but complete full in-person plan for its elementary school to the Radnor Township School District School Board on January 26. They had begun planning months before the board received the plan. I can accept that there are complexities that this district hadn't even imagined before a year ago. You might understand that Radnor is a different district with different constraints. And I understand that Radnor is a different district with different constraints. My point is they've been thinking about and planning for this moment all year long and they are ready to go. As far as I can tell, we have not been thinking about this moment until very recently, so we are told we are not ready to go.
No, we've been thinking about a variety of things throughout the year. I mean, it was just before the winter break when there was a huge throng of folks who were upset with me and the board for allowing hybrid to continue when they felt we should stop it. But having said that, with that in mind, my feeling from folks from CHOP were spring would be a time when we could make a bold decision. So we've been thinking spring all along.
Hugh Ehrenberg, Penn Valley. I'm rather stunned to learn that 1 year into this, we are still in the planning to collect data stage and don't have the furniture we would need to properly distance a full return. If this is a priority, as you say, and you meet as often as you do, we should have each room measured and charted with little tape boxes on the floor for students to sit in. If we finally get guidance based on recent data that 3 feet is enough and allow children back in school where they belong, what is the district plan to deliver instruction if teachers remain opposed to in-person learning on a larger scale? And what options for parents who are comfortable with in-person learning are being put in place while the district remains paralyzed in the hybrid mode? Jen Brasso, Gladwin. 6 feet distancing is not required by the PA Department of Health, Department of Education, or Montgomery County Office of Public Health. Every effort should be made to follow the 3 feet distancing so we can return to in-person as soon as possible. And spring break is too far away. My question is, how are other schools in our county of similar size and with similar protocols and without the testing we have making a return to in-person, but we aren't? What is really the issue? What is holding the board back from making this happen as soon as possible? The survey needs to be distributed as soon as possible so that the district understands where parents stand at this time. It could be a rolling survey to assess how family positions change over time, but we need a survey now to understand how many families are interested in returning to in-person so that the proper calculations are made with respect to distancing and room size. Jen Kelly, Penn Valley. Thank you to Mr. Lilly. The integrated math presentation was excellent and much appreciated. Can you please share how equity is being ensured with regard to ad hoc decisions to allow high school students to attend full-time in person? What are the criteria for granting these requests, especially given the context of cohort attendance imbalances? Mental health and general well-being, as well as education, and also related equity issues from not being able to attend full-time in person is catastrophic and yet was not acknowledged today. While others are moving towards full-time education options, we continue to be refused this for our children, and there appears to be no urgency. There is no reason not to open schools by the 1st of March. There weren't any timelines provided for any of the activities that could move us towards reopening. Please, can specific deadlines be committed to and people held to account for meeting them? Lori Omar, Alakinwood. It's time to send the survey. It's long overdue. Thank you for your hard work. Celeste Ehrenberg, Penn Valley. We have learned a fair amount about lack of transmission with appropriate mask use from healthcare settings in which a 6-foot spacing distance is not feasible. Can we apply this knowledge to our plans for less distancing, especially in our elementary school and middle school, when there is going to be a need to accommodate more children, potentially? Also, is there educational tools to help our personnel, teachers, other school building workers, feel more comfortable with adaptations that can be implemented in an effort to get children back to in-person learning? This again has been successful in healthcare setting. Krista Vaughn, Winwood. Thank you, Ms. Klein, for prompting the return to school discussion tonight. This should be a constant agenda item. I'm happy to hear some consideration to return with warmer weather and be creative in using flex space, outdoor space. I have 2 students at Lower Marion High School who have been hybrid, but are temporarily virtual because they play basketball and are trying to reduce the impact of any basketball exposure. Weekly testing of athletes has been great and running smoothly. The children will return to hybrid as soon as the basketball season is over, and we support a full return to school as soon as possible this spring. At the high school level, surveying now may provide information about families like my own who have chosen to stay home because of a winter sport, but will return to hybrid shortly and want to be full in person when available. Ian Amaro, Marion Station. Given that there's little evidence of transmission in schools, all the improvements to the buildings and personal behavior and hygiene, why would not the school district open full-time for those students who want to go back? There is plenty of data from other schools successfully reopening with similar conditions. We're learning from their experience. I am feeling hopeless that the schools will not reopen this school year. And I believe that is all the comments. Yep, that's all.
So let me summarize by saying, again, it is our intention to put together a plan that we believe is as safe as we can make it, using the science that's in front of us and the resources that we have. Since the beginning of this process, and we probably haven't talked about it in a long time, we improved the air quality in our buildings. We put bipolar ionization in so that we could reduce the viral spread. We're looking to increase that technology so that we can have more activities and performing arts for students as the year is coming to an end. As I had indicated in the conversation, the questions with Mr. Lee, I think we're pretty close on being able to expand our high schools because of the dedensification that's taken place there. It's all about risk, and some people have different risk tolerance levels than others. Even tonight in the comments that we heard, there was a difference in what folks felt comfortable with. That's where we are, and I think we're moving in the right direction.
Thank you, Mr. Copeland, and thank you, Mr. Roos, for excuse me, reading these comments. I just want to take a moment and speak to the concept or the concern around urgency. I can tell you without a doubt that I am very thankful for Mr. Copeland and all of the administration and staff at the district. The level of hours of time and effort and energy and passion that they have put toward trying to provide the best education is indescribable. I can tell you I have meetings on weekends with the administration, that it is a constant level of work going on. So I don't want people to feel like that desire and dedication is not there. I think that's really important for me to share my very strong feelings on that. We actually have action that we need to complete on tonight's agenda, which is unusual for an education committee. But I do want to move on and ask Mr. Orlando if you could please read the recommended action that is on our agenda.
Yes. In order to comply with the land development approval received from the Lower Merion Township for the new middle school project, it is recommended that the Board of School Directors adopts the traffic signal and access easement agreement and authorize the board president and the board secretary to sign and deliver the easement agreement to Lower Merion Township for recording, substantially in the form attached, by which the Lower Merion School District is granting an easement to Lower Merion Township to allow for the maintenance of a traffic signal and pedestrian crossing markings at the foot of the driveway leading from the new middle school to Montgomery Avenue, with such changes to such document as may be recommended by the district solicitor, and to take all other necessary actions to grant and record such easement.
Thank you, Mr. Orlando. Mr. Roos, could you take a moment and put that into layman's terms?
Do my best. This is an easement agreement, school district and the Lower Merion Township. It pertains to the installation and maintenance of a traffic signal and related improvements that's going to be at the intersection of Montgomery Avenue and the driveway of the new middle school. The agreement provides that the school district will install the signal, the mast arm, and the related improvements. Following the completion of these improvements, they will be what's called dedicated to the township, basically turned over to the township. This is according to Department of Transportation requirements. And then the township is going to have to be responsible for all future maintenance of the improvement. Now, the reason there needs to be an easement agreement is to give the township the right to enter on the portion of the school district's property that's near the driveway intersection, so that the township can perform any needed maintenance requirements on the traffic signal. Of course, the agreement provides that the township has to give the school district reasonable notice. They have to make sure they don't interfere with the district's use of their property, and keep the easement in safe condition and restore any property following any work that they do. It's all required by, as Mr. Orlando said, by the land development agreement for the new middle school.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Roos. Are there any questions from the board? It does not look like there are any. It is, as Mr. Roos explained, a pretty straightforward process that we're taking. So without any questions, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Great. A second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any against? Anyone abstaining? Great. So the motion passes. So thank you. Ms. LaPera, can you please share the upcoming meeting dates?
Certainly. We have the February 10th ad hoc committee meeting for equity and anti-racism at 7 p.m. And then the February 11th facilities and purchasing committee meeting at 8:30 a.m. And then Tuesday, instead of Monday next week, because of the holiday, we have the February 16th regular business board meeting at 8 p.m. All these meetings will be held via Zoom.
Thank you, Ms. LaPera, and thank you to everyone for your time and energy and attention this evening. In addition to the board meetings Ms. LaPera mentioned, which as always, I encourage everyone to attend and participate in the board committee meetings, as if they're a really great way to participate in the more detailed work of the board in a less formal setting. But I also want to remind everyone that tomorrow morning, the ISC is hosting its monthly hot topic meeting. Tomorrow's meeting is focused on special education and inclusion with Ms. Kim Frazier. The meeting's via Zoom at 9:30 in the morning, and you can find information to register in your HSA newsletters. So again, thank you all for your time, and there being no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.